And today what we are trying to do is actually to introduce to you as well as have a discussion with you on what are the things that we have learned from our own experiences through meeting some of you, through understanding what has happened in the last few months, but taking it a little further to show what we actually see and how actually to go ahead and write a good essay. So procedurally, we'll go in the following manner. I will just give you a very brief introduction on why we're actually doing this, basing it really on what has happened in the last few months. This will be followed by Peter, who will give a more structured discussion on how we use the Turnit-in software to identify the different kinds of problems, let me put it like that. We will have a break, and then we will follow it by Howard, who will give you some ideas on how to actually write an essay without immediately resorting to the Google and to copying paste. In other words, how can you develop your own argument and your own essay in a way that lets you avoid some of these problems that we are talking about. Why is the Board of Examiners involved in this? And that is because we have full responsibility actually for the whole examination procedures, which includes, amongst other things, also issues of sloppy referencing and plagiarism. What do? What we do is, when the scripts are given out to the course leaders, we ask them to actually correct the scripts through the software which is existent, which we use, the Turnit-in software. Now, the Turnit-in software shows some things, and if there's a problem, it is alerted to us by the course leaders. They do not apply the penalties themselves. All they do is tell us, hey, there's a problem, please check it further. They can make suggestions on what they feel it is bad, worse, but ultimately it's given to the board. What does the board do? It looks into it and sees whether it's a relevant issue, is it a serious problem. It then invites people, where necessary, to come and meet with the board. We send a letter to the individual student indicating what has been the result, including whether there have been penalties, what needs to be done. The resubmissions, if and when they come in, are rechecked by the board and then, of course, sent back to the course leaders and the normal with the penalties applied. In other words, what we try and do is to ensure, to keep a record of how the different students have gone across the board, and we apply the penalties in order to ensure that there's a level playing field. That is, one course leader is not allowed to make an extra penalty as opposed to another course leader. We ensure that it's the same. Minimally 2 of us sit in each of these meetings. So that is assured. So we take this job very seriously, and we are very careful to see that as far as possible, justice is and fairness is applied, including whether there have been penalties, what needs to be done. The resubmissions, if and when they come in, are rechecked by the board and then, of course, sent back to the course leaders and the normal with the penalties applied. In other words, what we try and do is to ensure, to keep a record of how the different students have gone across the board, and we apply the penalties in order to ensure that there's a level playing field. That is, one course leader is not allowed to make an extra penalty as opposed to another course leader. We ensure that it's the same. Minimally 2 of us sit in each of these meetings. So that is assured. So we take this job very seriously, and we are very careful to see that as far as possible, justice is and fairness is applied. Normally, and you can read the plagiarism issues on your rules and regulations, the first offense is usually considered a kind of a warning, but from the second time onwards, it's taken more seriously. Now, why suddenly this? Because, in fact, all of you have done your courses on academic skills, you've all done your referencing, and you've all done your quiz. Unfortunately, for reasons that we're not quite completely sure about, instead of our normal average of 4 to 6, maybe 10, kind of deep discussions with students, which takes over a full calendar here, we've had an enormous increase. And that has made us certainly worried, particularly, well, for our own self-preservation, because it means so many meetings, it means so many resets, it means so many hours of work. But more importantly, it is a real concern that these are happening in spite of all the efforts made by the academic skills staff, as well as writing, as well as the quiz. What has actually happened? Most often the issue is, oh, we did not know. This was really wrong. And as you can see from here, I'm sure you can see how familiar you are with it. I'll repeat it for those because of the recording. It's the first time we're actually putting this into practice. Yes, we always ask them, did you not do the quiz? Yes, we've done the quiz. Have you passed the quiz? Yes, we passed the quiz. So why are you doing this? Well, it's the first time we're actually putting it into practice. We forgot it, and so forth. The time pressure. There are too many exams, too many scripts we have to hand in a short period of time. It was just, that is often put. There is a certain kind of a pressure that, in other words, we want to do well. We have to do a prestigious job, and maybe we feel that that is a way of doing it. The author expressed exactly what I wanted to say. So actually my ideas are the same as that of the author, in effect. And then after all, the author is good at English, maybe English is not my first language, so why not use it? Actually, it's my own idea. Except that there's somebody else has expressed it in nice ways, and you know, a way that I could ever do it. Group work. We worked as a group. Now it's quite interesting. We worked as a group, but somehow, as you will see, the system picks up when individuals of the group present identical work. We all encourage group work. It's one of the pedagogical things that are being supported in this institute. But that is not the same as writing identical essays. But of course, it's very natural. I thought it first, somebody else thought it first. I was the original author, somebody else wasn't the original author, but the original author did not submit it first. So the first person has got out of the system, and so forth. I didn't mean to cheat. I think in many cases it's a genuine enough excuse, but not really very valid. I was unwell and my friend helped. Solidarity, very good, something to be appreciated. But if it comes out and it's caught by the system, it's not acceptable. Be very careful about that. The friend who helps you is also as guilty. So do not do that, and recall that both are fraud involved in it. So the board is not really interested, apart from its own self-interest of spending time and effort and energy on this. What is important is that we're trying to help you. We're really trying to make sure that you are supported in your future work, in your understanding, not simply within the institute, but also when you go beyond the institute. But more pertinently, within the next 2 terms. And it is in a way part of what the ISS holds as promoting academic integrity. To end this very brief introduction, which is largely based, as I said, on our own perceptions and worries, and our sincere attempt to try and guide you in the future on how to do your essays in a way in which lives up to the standards of academic integrity. At this stage, this is just an introduction, re-emphasizing the problems that we've had in the last term and how we never ever want to see that kind of work again, the efforts again, but most importantly that you yourself learn how to move forward in a positive manner and living up to the standards of academic integrity, which is so important at this time, especially with the internet being so accessible.
an elephant, and you can see all kinds of researchers, and they take a look at the elephant, and they see all different aspects. And if you would ask each of them to describe the elephant, then you would get a lot of ideas, a lot of different kind of concepts. One will talk about the leg, one will talk about the skin of the elephant, and all these stories together. If you read the stories independently, it will not tell you plagiarism, but when you see plagiarism, and that's the idea, when you see it, you will recognize it. So that's the kind of way I'm teaching. And I have found another cartoon, and you can see that's the left-hand cartoon, and I thought that one of the two is plagiarism. Because for me, the idea is the same. It's about this elephant and people taking a look at the elephant. And at the end, I will come back to this cartoon. But now start to think about for yourself, is this plagiarism or is this not plagiarism? Now my background is that I'm on official plagiarism committee, an international plagiarism committee, and you can see this is a list of persons who have committed plagiarism. And it is different from ISS because here we really try to punish the people, right? We simply try to provide the incentives that people stop. We have professors on the list, associate professors. People who have been working in academia for very long. So here it's blaming and shaming, but that's not the purpose of the meeting today. The purpose of the meeting today is that you get a better understanding and also recognize that this is happening. Now imagine that you're on a list like this. That doesn't feel good, right? That doesn't feel good. And it can be even worse. This is for a person who got his article retracted, which means that everybody in the world is being told that this article, which was published, was self-plagiarism. So everybody knows it, right? It is like an official publication, but this time you don't want your name on it. Now take a look at this picture and imagine that you are in this picture. Simply pick one of the persons that you see. These are happy persons because they just graduated. This is PhD candidates and they got a special certificate. So this is in honor of all these persons, right? So you can imagine that this is a photograph that you would keep on top of your, of your desk to show to other people. Now one of the persons, Professor Swart, he became a professor. He resigned due to plagiarism. He plagiarized his full thesis, copy-pasted it. Everybody accepted the thesis. And then he had 4 articles which were also completely copy-pasted. Now we don't have anybody here in the room who can beat this, right? So this is my top guy when it's about plagiarism. But imagine that you're on the photograph as one of the innocent victims. You would feel really bad. And that's one of the things that we want to ensure, that we don't have stuff which is plagiarized on the website so that your work at the ISS is being devaluated. So that people cannot say that we don't take this seriously. Now, what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to show you what we see. I've selected a number of things and I'm going to show it to you and also to give you some mental memory. Then I'm going to talk to you about discovering plagiarism without Turnit-in, because you don't have always Turnit-in around. And in the old days, I could also find plagiarism, but for you it is important because I can tell you one thing. If I work with somebody and I write an article with somebody the first time, I'm ashamed that I do this, but I will run the full article through Turnit-in to check whether this guy is reliable or not. And it is not that I don't trust the person, but it may be that the way he works is not okay. Okay? But there are also things that you can see without Turnit-in, and we will see a number of examples there. And then I want to talk a little bit about common knowledge. So this is what we see. This is a research paper proposal made in May 2014, and over here it says the Turnit-in score is 38%, and that's the similarity score. So we have a number of sources, and we can find over here the kind of sources. This is a previous student paper at ISS. If you want to copy-paste from a previous paper at ISS, it is a very stupid idea. because that's the first thing the Turnitin tests. You can see we have all the sources from which it is being quoted. So this is from a university, this is from an internet source, this is also an internet source, paper, this is from Wikipedia, simply copy-paste it from Wikipedia, right? Okay, so that's what we see. And we don't have to do anything at this moment because we already know that this person is in the danger zone because it is more than 20%. Now, it does not mean that if you are below 20% similarity score that you are okay. But we will always take a look when it is above 20%. And then we can find everything because the software helps us to find everything. See, we can exactly see where a word was changed. We can see whether there were persons trying to paraphrase or hide, or that they... We will see exactly the kind of thing. If you would correct a typo, for example, if this is 2004 in the original and you checked and you changed it to 2005, then we will see that this is the change that has been made. And this is for a large chunk of material, but we see this also when we take a look at shorter sections. And you can see over here, this is the source that is picked up over here, this is the source that is picked up over here. So this is what we get. This is what everybody gets at ISS. This is what the lecturer sees when he opens your paper. This is when we have explained to you that something is ad verbatim. It means one for one. So you can see this is a full section which has been copied. And one of the most problematic parts of this part is that it is not referenced at all. And it is also not indicated. Two different persons, the same joke. Exactly the same joke. Right? 1981, 2005. Now this is copy-pasting, and it is not full copy-pasting, but sometimes there is a little bit of a change. So here it starts to read its first discovery, and here it starts to read its first discovery. You can see it is, but it is not verbatim, it is not one by one. There is a little bit of change, but the changes are very small. Now, since you know that you're not allowed to do copy-paste, many people do use synonyms or rephrasing. So, this is the first thing. Take a look. Since it's discovery by non-indigenous people, it's difficult to pronounce, right? You indigenous, so you make non-native there, right? Okay, so this is find replace. You take a look and you find synonyms. It is still plagiarism because you use the basic text. It will turn up and we will take a look at it. This is not like paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is saying what is in an article without repeating it. It includes the proper citation, so that is okay. It's not hidden that it is from another source, but it is too close. Typically what you would get from your supervisor or from your lecturer, when you give a paper, he would encourage you to take a little bit more distance from the sources and to trust in yourself. Don't use the words over there. Now this is an example of rephrasing. So first take a look at the left-hand side. And the joke is good, right? Then take a look at the right-hand side. Oops. Same joke? Right? With different words, right? So now you see the idea is the same, but when you look at it first time, you see that there is a lot of differences, but then you can see that it is exactly the same. So this is the kind of thing where you still, according to me, plagiarizing. You're using the idea, you're rephrasing. Don't rephrase. Use your own words. It's better to write bad English. Right? I'm happy if somebody writes bad English because then I know that it is this person's own. And then one of the remarks that struck me really was somebody, I showed this, we showed an example, And then the person told us, yes, but this is quilting. So there's a real word, a name for this kind of thing. And people think that this is okay. Quilting is using parts of papers and mixing it to make a new kind of text, right? Two pieces and you combine it. This one, a hybrid, you can see different sources combined, it flows. This is actually a direct quotation, there's quotation marks over here. So that is okay, right? And the quotation is put somewhere, so the argumentation, the line of argumentation is different. You are able to combine the articles, and the only thing you do is you don't use your own words. It's better to use your own words than the words of somebody else. I only quote people when I really want to show how stupid they are. Then I give the quote, and below the quote I will write how stupid they are. And otherwise I don't quote people. I will give reference to their ideas. I will give the references. I will discuss it, but I don't use their words. And that's a mashup, even more, right? So, copied materials, multiple sources. Now this is also quilting, and this is the only quilting that I allow. And this is Madeline Ocampo, and this is the prize-winning poster against plagiarism of plagerism.org. And you can see exactly what she's done. She's been quilting using this, and then in the middle, okay, so now this is a very good idea. So this is where I like the quilting. Quilting is not okay. You cannot mix the sources and then think that it is no plagiarism. Self-plagiarism is when you use things that you've been writing before. Lots of discussion about this, but not within the board of examiners. Because if you write something for one course and you write the same for the other course, then we think that you don't deserve two grades. That you have to still do the same as the other students, write a paper for one course and write a paper for another course. Take a look. We have 4 ostriches over here. You see, 1, 2, 3, 4. It repeats. And then suddenly we have the other one. He moves the other side. It's an original idea. But that's not the only way that we have derivatives. Because if you take a look at this print, you will see that the print has a derivative in the actual oil painting behind me. So originally it's a print, and later it became a painting. And what one is the original? In arts both are original, and there is no plagiarism. And there's even more kinds of derivatives. Like for example, when a print gets the cover of a book. And the nice thing about the cover of this book is that there is a joke. You only see the original idea, but behind it there's often replication. And I ask you to take a look at the pictures and the prints and to decide for yourself, what is the original? Is this the original, or is this the original? And in the same vein, is this the original, or is this the original? Or is this the original, and this the original? Over here I have 4 paintings, and what we will see is I'm not going to change the paintings, but still we will see that it matters a lot in which way we represent the same sort of idea. So this is the first one. And that's the second one. And that's the fourth one. And now watch how the painting stands. Because I want to make you think. Because many people think that they cannot be an original. But once you've read something, and you have read a lot, and you have an opinion, and you write it down, that's where you are original. And you don't have to worry. Don't be afraid. And if you read the question, and you don't go to internet, but you think about the question, and you make your outline before you go to the internet, and you know the kind of argument that you want to make, then you will not plagiarize because this is your own kind of idea, and you're going to read the literature in order to substantiate the argumentation that you are making. Sloppy referencing means it is referenced, but not okay. So it means the reference needs to be somewhere in the paper, and especially it needs to be close to where you're quoting. But you can see over here that there is a large part which is exactly identical to over here, and the person has put quotation marks over there, quotation marks over there, quotation marks over there, and quotation marks over there, and here are the sources. Because it suggests that it is taken from different sources. And that's where it goes wrong. This person has simply imagined sources. Says, well, this is the first quote, second quote, third quote. This in itself is giving you a bad grade if you have quotation after quotation after quotation after quotation without any real analysis of yourself. So, quotation marks. For me, my biggest problem is that I read so much that I'm always afraid that I will use the words of somebody else without the intention, right? So I've been thinking of not reading anymore. But that's not a solution, right? So sometimes something can happen, but it will not happen during all of the paper. And then I talked already about this issue that the references are not found. So the references are not found. It can be they don't exist, you made it up, but it can also be that the references are not exactly to the parts where you use it. Sometimes the reference is on page 40, but the copy-paste is on page 20. The only reason that we can discover it is because the human brain can do anything. If you take a look at the top, you will see that the idea is one red thing and a lot about it. This is about individuality or about somebody who is alone or somebody who is different, right? And you can see the concept right away. So that's in your brain. You can see that this is the same idea, although the wording is different. You can see directly that if you have something like this, then this is strange, right? So there is a break. We can see the breaks. Very poor English, very poor English, very poor English, and suddenly this is like Shakespeare is writing, right? Okay. So how do you recognize plagiarism? So the thing that, how I recognize this is I take a look, right? And I see things like it is strange, or I see something which is completely stupid, or I think, where did I read this? Why is this not substantiated? You have a claim, but you don't have a footnote. Who was thinking about this? This is evidence in your argumentation. Mix of good and bad, mix of styles. No flows in the argumentation, sudden breaks, wrong concept, and you don't understand the concept. Too good to be true. This looks different, right? This person has mixed up everything. Everything. So it looks different, but it is the same. See? So mixing up, putting it in the different kind of sequence, it doesn't help you, it doesn't get you. And sometimes people will recognize this directly also in text. Now I wanted to tell you something about common knowledge. So this is somebody who is definitely trying to avoid plagiarism, right? And it is not necessary, because sometimes things are common knowledge. And you don't have to use different kind of words, right? Now, I started with this, and I told you that this was about this is the same idea, so it is plagiarism, right? But that's only when you're from a Western culture. Because if you're from an Asian culture, then you know the story. The story is about 6 blind men and the elephant. So these blind men, they take a look at the elephant and they report to the king, and they all tell a different kind of story, because one was taking a look at the tail, the other one was taking a look at, and you see it over there. It's a spear, it's a fan, it's a wall, it's a tree. Now, if you go to the internet, and it can go on forever and ever. So that's common knowledge. So it looks, to me it looked like plagiarism, but when I took a very detailed look, I found out that there is some difference, right? And for me that's interesting. That's something interesting. And that's why I take every case as in plagiarism as an interesting case. And you can see that even if I have a conviction at the start that it is clear plagiarism, I will always give people the benefit of the doubt. Now, there is still one question that needs to be answered. So, first of all, did you like the presentation? Was it boring? Did you learn something? What was wrong with the presentation? I have not said anything about the sources. Come on, this is full-out plagiarism. I've ripped them. Right? So that's why it says wrong is right.
Hopefully, apart from all the doomsday kind of issues that we have been talking about, with some hope, of course, Howard is going to now give a presentation, actually, how you could move forward. And how we can use our own brains, our own ideas, our own initiatives, our own understanding, to actually write a good essay without having all these other problems around.
I'm going to preface all of this by saying something that may piss off my colleagues, but I have to say it anyway. And that is that I've noticed over quite some period of time now a deterioration in really the whole academic environment. We actually know that plagiarism is a problem not just at ISS, but it's a growing problem everywhere. And I actually don't blame the students. I don't blame the students as cheats and this and that and the other. I think it's this enormous and absurd pressure to publish. You know, it's really ridiculous now. And we impose a lot of pressure on you as well to write and be quick and write. So that's I'm prefacing what I have to say, because this is important also in the way you approach things. because actually we're encouraging people not to think anymore. And this is a big, big problem. Okay, just do it, just write, don't think. You know, I mean, you can see that, you know, academics are doing the same thing, they're just writing. Maybe they're not plagiarizing, but actually in many cases they're writing garbage. You know, and we actually see it, we see it. Students also see it. Okay, so this is my attempt at, you know, holding back the tide, as it were, and going back to like 30 odd years ago, where we gave people actually instructions: think first, really think. Don't read until you think. Okay, it's a sort of very old Chinese proverb, isn't it? You know, what's Confucius or whatever, I forget the exact proverb, but anyway, it's somewhere in there that you really have to start thinking again. And it's with that in mind that I give this instruction. And I do have to admit one thing. It was told to me by one of my students today. She had, I think she's been here a long time, and she has attended many of my study skills classes and also essay writing classes. And she says, at the beginning she thought she got it. Second year, I've definitely got it. Third year, no, now I've got it. Fourth year, she realizes every time she learns again, because now she's putting it into practice. So it's not something that is like that. You've got to really think and put it into practice. Okay, it's not going to come like that. And part of it is have confidence. Okay, because we're actually not very confident. We're very insecure. I mean, that's part of being a student, isn't it? Others have knowledge, you don't have knowledge. I'm very insecure. That's also why we want to use other people's language as well. So part of my message is also be confident. Okay, try and think, well, I've got a good brain, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to use my ideas as well. Part of this is, look, actually out there, a lot of people are just not thinking anymore. So, you know, you can make a difference by actually breaking that and starting to think. And with that in mind, I have a few basic tips. Okay, so one of my standard mantras, I repeat it. Guys, 4233, you remember I said majority of you will not answer the question. 10 groups, 5 questions. How many groups actually answered the question out of the 10 groups? Okay, I told them beforehand, you know what I used to bet with everyone was I give you 500 euros. 500 euros. Every single person in the class, I will give you 500 euros if more than half of you answer the question. It's very difficult. People just don't answer questions. They read the question and immediately internet. Okay, on the subject, on the subject. They don't stop and think, what is that question really asking me? They don't reflect on it. They don't talk to people about it. It's like this. How many of them, we had the tutorials and I showed them, how many of you really answered the question? Well, definitely less than 50%, you see. So again, for I think the 25th year, I saved my 500 euros per student. Okay? I know I will never actually have to pay it because this is one of the greatest weaknesses. Now, here is something very important. You ever want to have a chance of appealing your mark and winning your appeal, if you haven't answered the question, you're already on a slippery slope. Okay, because no matter whether you have discovered the secret of the universe, you have merged all these 4 forces of the universe together in your paper, if you haven't answered my question, I'm going to fail you. Okay? Or let's put it this way, I might feel generous at that moment and not fail you, but you're never going to get a good mark if you haven't answered the question. And that's the starting point, is people rush quickly. They don't contemplate, they don't think, they don't talk to others about the question. Okay, so this is very important preparation. What's the main point of the question? That's number 2. Okay, because remember, it's either 2,500 words or 3,000 words. Okay, that's the normal limits. That's not a lot. But I'm going to show you the sorts of things that the students wanted to do. They wanted to describe the whole history of an economy. They wanted to compare it with 2 other economies. They wanted to outline 3 different theoretical perspectives and the methodologies underlying all of those, and then do empirical studies of their own, all in 2,500 words. Wonderful. If you can do that, Nobel Prize is next, okay? Because, you know, this is frankly absurd. But look at the outlines. And that's the way you start, and that's what makes you crazy. Okay, when you're doing the research with that sort of outline, you're going to go insane. And if you don't go insane, you think, let me just copy and paste those blocks in there and fudge them together and hope somehow, miraculously, it all works out for me. Okay, instead, what you have to do is focus. What is the essence of this question? What is it really asking me? What is the crucial issue that needs to be addressed? Many questions are very broad. I'm going to show you examples. And you just can't manage that by getting depth. Because when I mark you, the scores over 90 are the ones that give me depth. Okay, you can't get depth when it's very, very broad. You only get depth when you focus on the core issue and go in detail. Okay, so this is number 2. Number 3 is map out your outline. And here is something I repeat to everyone, but it does fall a bit on deaf ears, is use the lectures and the lecture notes as guidelines. You know, it's very sad to me. I think, wow, that was a great course I gave, you know, a bit of ego coming in here and so on. I think I really communicated ideas. I read the essay, I know it's the first internet search item, then second internet search item, third internet search item. Anything of my lectures in those essays? Nothing. It's as if people have never attended my lectures at all. You know, and that's the problem. You know what the problem is? We let the literature dictate to us our answer. Rather than thinking, look, that guy actually gave me a lot of interesting ideas, and most importantly, I give a guidance to what is important in terms of the literature. Who should you be reading? Okay, instead, you pick the first item on Google Scholar. That person might be just an MA student like you. This might be just another research paper or just another MA essay. And you're quoting someone I've never heard of and no one else has ever heard of. And we don't know what sort of authority that person speaks with, you see. What you need to do is go back to the lectures. Now, in the lecture, that teacher was focusing on this particular person and saying this person was the authority on that subject, which is really important. You see, the lecture notes will give you a guide as to what is important, so what's the important issue, and who is important for you to be focusing. You don't need to read vast amounts, but you need to read the very important literature. Okay, so when you're mapping out your answer, use the lecture notes as a guide. Try and begin with the standard literature, in other words, okay, and not obscure texts. And here's my own recommendation to students is avoid committing yourself to giving original ideas and doing original work in essays of 2,500 words. Okay, because actually to do that, to actually set it up in any meaningful way, will take you at least an RP, at least. And even an RP, you're going to be lucky in some cases to manage it. It's probably a PhD. Okay, but for an essay, the trick is always to find out what the standard literature says on that issue and critically appraise it. Okay, that's the way you actually make progress. And that's the way you cope with an essay. Okay? Let's just go on to it. Now, I have basically 3 sections in all essays which we need to address: is the introduction, substantive part, and very important, the conclusion. Remember what I told you about the conclusion? It's 12 o'clock at night. Peter is very tired. He's had his glass of wine. Okay? He's looking at all these essays stacked in front of him, and he's going to read the conclusion first. Okay? Because I do. I always read the conclusion first, because that already tells me, is this person really focusing on the question? Okay, so that's why I emphasize that, but I'm going to give you a few more tips on that. Look at the introduction, and I've already mentioned this question, but I will repeat it. Answer the question. Answer the question. Okay? Exam, answer the question. And then focus your answer. Indicate what your focus is in that introductory paragraph. It's also very important. And here's the important part, number 3, is sometimes questions are very broad. Sometimes questions are badly formulated. We're human beings, teachers. We may not look like it. We may look like aliens, but I assure you that we're human beings and we make mistakes. Okay, and we formulate things pretty badly, but you're in an exam and you have to make the best of it. Okay, so here's the thing you do, is you actually indicate how you understand this question and how you're going to manage it by specifically focusing on this aspect. Okay, and justifying it. Okay, not trying to actually say superficial things about lots and lots of issues which are vaguely related to the question. Okay, but you get focus, and I'm going to give you some examples of ambiguous questions so that you can see that in just a moment. And then the last part I always suggest to students is give a rough indication as to how you're going to approach it. What is the structure of the rest of your paper? And what's the logic of that structure? And some students, and I encourage this, some staff may not like it, but I encourage it, is give me a rough idea of what argument you're trying to develop already in the introduction. This way I know what you're trying to say, okay? And then I like to see it again coming back in the conclusion, okay, with a bit more elaboration. But for me, this, remember, I'm tired in the evening. What am I reading? I'm reading your conclusion, but I'm also spending quite a bit of time on your introduction, because then I know whether you're thinking clearly or not thinking clearly. Okay, it's like when we read your RPs, I spend an inordinate amount of time on your research objectives and questions, and how they're organized, and how clear they are, and how delineated they are. Because then I know whether you've got a manageable RP or not. It's the same with an essay. Okay, it's very important. One practice you have to avoid is, so this is coming from 4233. I asked this question: where has most investment finance come from in successful developing countries? Forget the second part. Okay, then someone actually gives a title of their essay answering that question. In the title, I can see they're already answering a different question. You see? Profit and government intervention as the fuel of successful developing economies. I didn't ask them to explain what makes successful developing economies. I asked them what is the source of investment finance. You see? From the title, I already knew they were not going to answer the question, you know. And I already knew roughly what mark I was going to give them. Save me an enormous amount of time, you know, because then I could easily cut through the rest. An example of a question, and these are questions I have set and I have seen set, okay, and I ask it deliberately. Economic liberalization has been detrimental to development of many developing countries. Now you know what I'm going to say. Look at those words. What is economic liberalization? It's vast, isn't it? Is it product markets? Is it factor markets? Is it international trade? Is it international financial flows? We can go on endlessly. Okay, so how do you deal with that in 2,500 words? It's a miracle, isn't it, if you can do all of that? Then, to make matters worse, I use words like detrimental. What does detrimental mean? Okay, it could mean many things. Then to the development. Is development easy to understand? You've done your general course, you know that. Could mean this, it could mean that. And then to many developing countries. Who are those developing countries? Can you see? I mean, 2,500 words. If I give it to someone as an RP, do you think they can even manage it in an RP? Of course not. Okay? So, supposing you have that, and you have no choice but to answer it, let's say coursework essay, one method I suggest to people is find groups of people that keep talking about this. Because there are, in the literature, okay, there is a huge literature that actually says things like that, where economic liberalization, they mean trade liberalization. And that whole discussion is trade liberalization and actually growth, not welfare. So what you do in the introduction, you make clear that it's this particular aspect of the literature that I'm addressing. Because in principle, you make clear that all these different words would require you to do a very broad and unmanageable essay. You know, don't insult the teacher, please, because you'll be failed immediately if you insult us for asking these terrible questions. But what you have to do is find a way of using the literature to focus your answer and then give that depth. Let's just do a couple more. Okay, can spectacular growth performance of China be attributed to economic liberalization? Same point. Same point. And that is very specific because there's a whole group of people following World Bank literature that is explicitly talking only about trade liberalization. Because there's no financial liberalization in China, we know that. It's just trade liberalization. And once you can actually find that literature which keeps on focusing on that, game over. Okay, you see, you're letting the literature tell you what is meant by those concepts. And that's a very important principle, because sometimes these concepts, people feel they have to define all these words. Don't do that. Because the minute you start defining words, I'm going to ask you, why are you defining it like that? Because it's so ambiguous. Get the literature to interpret those words. Okay? And then you're just addressing the literature. You know, this is not you committing yourself. Always remember, don't commit yourself. Don't say, I'm going to do these studies. I'm going to define these words. I'm going to provide you with a whole theoretical framework. Here is a terrible one. Assess competing explanations, already we're vast, for continuing problems. What problem? My God, you know, I mean, that can be everything under the planet. Okay? Who asked such a dumb question? I did ask it deliberately. I wanted people to actually try and do an outline to it. Okay, it's a non-assessable outline, but people tried without any statement before. So we had the seminar, and people had written things, you know, incredible things. I mean, they were going to cover everything under the planet, okay, all in this 2,500 words. And I then went through and asked them, really? You can do all of this in 2,500 words? Okay, what they should have done was said to me, this is not manageable, so I focus. Okay, so even there, this is more difficult. This is more difficult because, you know, how do you really focus? Because actually, you know, you can pick up almost any arguments and address them. Okay, so that's where it's a problem. Okay, let me quickly get on to the substantive part. And here, one of the great difficulties of students is to get to the point. To spend most of your energy on the key issues addressing the question. So what I have is always, this is a standard thing that makes, you know, like when you rub your nails on a blackboard, you know, what that feeling is like, you know, you go, ugh. So when students say, I'm going to do a brief background on the history of the world, a brief outline of all the theories that ever came up, you know, on economics or something like that. This is an exaggeration, but that term brief, as soon as I read, I'm going to do a brief blah, 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 I know this is blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is actual nonsense, padding, you know, not getting to the point. Procrastination, wasn't it you that used the term, Peter? Procrastination. This is standard stuff that we all do. We procrastinate. We don't get to the most important point. In the outline, make sure you have up there what's the most important issue and get to it almost immediately. Avoid giving your own views. This is again the thing. I am going to argue that. Okay, that's another standard line. I am going to argue that, or develop the argument that. For you to develop your own argument takes a lot. I'm repeating that. Okay, so these are standard lines I look for in the substantive part when I know students are then going to go astray. Okay, so brief outlines are part of that. Then try and use the literature. Okay, and don't just select random articles from the internet. Okay, I go back to that. When you actually go to articles, have questions written down. Why are you reading that article? Otherwise you read line 1, line 2, first paragraph, second paragraph. It's 50 pages, it's 11 o'clock at night, you're tired. You know, how much are you absorbing? But if you read selectively, I need to read this to get this piece of information. Okay, and that again helps you not plagiarize because you've got your own structure, your own argumentation. You're just reading to reinforce your ideas and thoughts. Okay, but you're not reading for that piece to influence you directly and to condition your answer. When you present arguments, I often read, X said this, Y said this. This is not critical appraisal. Okay, X said this, I think it's a solid argument because of blah, blah, blah. The assumptions underlying this are this. Some of these have validity, others don't. Many people question the validity. You understand? I'm not saying X said this, Y said something opposite. Therefore, because Y says something opposite, that's a criticism of X. This is not acceptable. Okay? This is not acceptable practice. The same with empirical evidence. I disagree with that empirical evidence because someone else has presented another set of evidence. First, you need to look at the evidence being presented. How valid is that evidence? How did they get that information? Okay, how plausible is that? How does it support their argumentation? Then if you want to present someone else's evidence, that's fine. But it's not, you can't make counterfactual arguments like that. You can't say, this is wrong because I got some other evidence. Okay? So this is actually something that is very, very common. Many of the papers. Last section. Okay, now I repeat this many, many times, but this is out of, let's say, 20 years of teaching, I can say categorically that 20 to 25% of all essays have concluding chapters which have nothing to do with the question. Okay, and as soon as I read it, I know these people are at that 60 level and probably fail mark. Okay, as soon as I read that. And there, the main thing to do is to bring the main points you have made and show that you're addressing the question. So what is the main point you have made addressing the question? What have you found in your essay? It's easier said than done. You know, again, I repeat it over and over again, but how many times people just don't do that? And I show them and they're incredulous. Really? Did I do this? I'm going to show you an example. Then you often see new analyses being brought in the concluding section. Why are the new analyses brought in the conclusion? We don't know. But what is normal for ISS people, I suppose that's because you all come from some policy-related something or another, you're asked a question which actually doesn't require you to say anything about policy. But a Pavlovian response of all ISS students is to put something on policy in the concluding section. It actually is totally irrelevant to the answer, but you feel some compulsion, don't you, to write something on policy. Again, big problem because 2,500, 3,000 words. You see, you can't waste words. Be precise. I finished with these couple of examples. To what extent can the recent world economic crisis, you recognize this, guys, be attributed to the mercantilist policies of Asian countries? Okay, so I'm just going to show you the answer given to this. So the person writes the introduction. In answer to the question, the paper will, so they say A and B. I'm ignoring A and B for the moment, but look at C. Look at the evolution of the recent world economic crisis. Okay, remember the question is the impact of mercantilist policies on the economic crisis, and that actually is emphasized by one, possibly two groups. But now they're going to look at the nature of the crisis, okay, the evolution of the crisis. And then, look at this one. This is the crucial bit. They're going to provide an explanation of the causes of the crisis as advanced by three theoretical approaches. Why three theoretical approaches? Because that's the way I teach. Okay, neoclassical, new Keynesian, and heterodox. And I've told you before, many times, when you're answering questions, don't do what we do for pedagogical reasons. I teach like this to show that there are different viewpoints. But when you're answering a question, actually, normally what you get is a debate between two groups. One group says, well, it's mercantilist policies that caused the crisis, and then people are criticizing them. You see, no labels. Focus directly. But can anyone write in 2,500 words D? Can anyone do that? It's such a complex and complicated thing and requires so much by way of presentation. Again, when I read that, I know, this is not going to happen. And then the substantive part. I just, pick up a couple of things. Look, number 2, explain briefly that mercantilism is not a new phenomenon, and see how it was previously pursued by the West. Can you do that briefly? And is it relevant in the first place? Has that got anything to do with the core answer? Of course not. It's just padding. And if the person tried to do it, it would be impossible. Then, thereafter, a brief outline of the other two theoretical perspectives explaining the causes of economic crisis. You see, the interpretation of the essay now is as if I want someone to explain the causes of economic crises and incidentally mention mercantilism. You understand? It's made it unmanageable. It's actually not answering the question. We're with problems. This is where I finish, so this is the last one. Can the spectacular growth performance of China be attributed to economic liberalization policies? Here's the conclusion. The last section will draw conclusions about the primary causes of spectacular growth of China. I didn't ask you to analyze the causes of growth of China. I asked you to address one debate that it's liberalization that caused this growth. That's totally different. To actually go and look at the causes of growth of China is a monster subject. Liberalization, economic liberalization, there's actually a very specific debate which focuses only on trade liberalization. They use the term economic liberalization to mean trade liberalization, and I've shown this in the lectures. That's your focus. And when you answer specifically economic liberalization. Now, when you're doing your outlines, I advise you seriously, you do your outline, first cut, ask yourself, look yourself in the mirror, am I really answering this question? Have I got focus? Am I concentrating on the key point? And what are the questions when I read the literature? What are the questions I'm asking of the literature? Okay? Not starting by, let me read the literature and hope that I find some article that answers my essay question. Okay? That's the norm, isn't it? You read to see which piece of internet wisdom is going to help you directly answer that question because it's addressing that question. Don't do it like that. Apart from anything else, you know, it could be another one of those rubbishy articles. Okay, but you have to be guided. Go to the important ones, even there, interrogate them. In the sense that, ask the questions. This is what I want to know, that's all I want to know. Have confidence, practice it. You'll never, never regret it, really, but it takes confidence. It takes confidence and you have to work with each other. Ask someone, this is my outline, can you help me? Do you really think that I'm addressing the question? Because sometimes we don't see our own mistakes. It's others who can see the mistakes. You know, when you are criticizing someone else, you're always better at it, isn't it? You don't actually see you've committed the same crimes. That's what the tutorials are about, and you'll see it. So try and do that outside, because you'll also save yourself a tremendous amount of time if you approach this by concentrating, thinking beforehand. Good luck.